there. My name is Brianna, and my presentation is on Chapter 8, pages 189 through 199, and it is on the constructivist view of learning. So let's start off by talking about what is constructivism. Okay. Constructivism believes that learning is much more than memory. So basically, constructivism, if you want to think about maybe Bloom's taxonomy, you think about the several levels up at the top. Those are the higher order thinking skills. That is where constructivism lives. Okay, that is their apartment complex. They don't like memorization. They don't like just spitting out information, just regurgitating it. They want students to understand and apply, evaluate, analyze. They want students to construct, if you will, constructivism, construct their own learning and construct their own understanding. All right. So that's what I was saying. Learning is much more than it's understanding and application. The task of education isn't to just pour the information in the students' heads, but it's to give them complex tasks and engage their minds and develop this higher understanding, higher order thinking skills, problem solving skills. Okay. So students must individually discover and transform complex information. And they do that by comparing new information against old information and revising old rules when they no longer work. Now that should sound really familiar. It should sound like a philosopher that we discussed at the beginning of the semester. We're going to talk about him in just a few slides. So just think about his name and I'm going to tell you'll recognize it when we get there. Okay. Constructivism is a student-centered approach. It's student-centered instruction. There's a big difference between student-centered and teacher-centered, and I have a diagram that we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And this is kind of just a nice bow on the whole idea of constructivism, and that is that teacher is the guy on the side. They are the fence. They're kind of just there to guide you. They're not there to tell you. They're not there to tell you where to go, how to go there, when you're supposed to get there. They're just there to help you along. Okay. So here's the little diagram that I wanted to show you that I was talking about. Let's look at figure A here. All right. We have this nice teacher lady and this little boy. And the teacher is telling him that she'll tell him everything that he needs to know. She tells him that he needs to memorize the information and that he will be required to reproduce that information. And the student replies, I'll listen and copy your notes. I'll memorize the information and I'll reproduce it. Okay, that is a teacher-centered approach. That is the exact opposite of a student-centered approach like constructivism. Okay, figure B here. The teacher tells the little boy, tells her student, I need to know what you know, all right? And I need to understand how you learn, and I'm going to help you develop your own understanding. And the student says, well, I'll explain to you what I know. I'll show you how I learn, and then I'll enter into a dialogue with you to improve my understanding. So it's all about talking things out. Constructivism is really big on talking. They like to talk a lot. Okay, now here's a pretty little picture that just introduces some of the key concepts we'll be discussing today. We'll be discussing the idea of scaffolding and cognitive apprenticeship, discovery learning, the zone of proximal development, as well as Piaget and Vygotsky. All right? So here we have the roots of constructivism. We have Mr. Piaget and Mr. Vygotsky. Did you remember that thing I was talking about earlier? I said you're gonna recognize it when we hear it. Well, about comparing old rules against new rules and to get rid of old ones when they don't work. That's straight Piaget, right? When we talked about back in chapter 2, when he was talking about his learning theory, or his theory of cognitive development, and that's, talked about schemes and the little boxes that we exist in. And what we were talking about earlier was straight Piaget and his boxes, his schemes. Assimilation and accommodation, right? So whenever the rule could fit into that scheme, they just make it work. When it doesn't fit anymore, they accommodate, when it doesn't fit anymore, they just kick it out and they make a whole new scheme, okay? So here we have 3 roots of constructivism, and these 3 roots come from both Piaget and Vygotsky. These guys both share these three things in common. Okay, and here's this one I was just talking about. Cognitive change only happens when previous knowledge goes through a process of disequilibration, right? And that means there's an imbalance between what is understood and what is encountered. So that's when you have to decide, okay, am I going to just get rid of it? Am I get rid of what I know and just focus on the new thing? Or I'm going to make it work, okay? Then we have these two guys right here. We have the social nature of learning and learning groups. And although Vygotsky although Piaget talked about some of this stuff, these more so come from Vygotsky, okay? So, like I was saying, if you notice, you saw Piaget, he only really had one major thing. The other two were from Vygotsky. So, although there are some roots from Piaget, constructivism is more heavily founded, more heavily developed through the theories of Vygotsky. With that in mind, there are four key principles of Vygotsky's theories that are evident in constructivism. The first is social learning, then there's the ZPD, the zone of proximal development, cognitive apprenticeship, and mediated learning. All right. So first up, we have social learning. So let's talk about that for a second. Okay. Children learn through social interaction. This is what Vygotsky said. I believe Piaget said it as well. This is how learning occurs according to constructivists. That learning is a social thing. It's something that should be talked out. It's something that should be talked about. Social interaction and learning through that can come through both interaction with adults and peers. This type of learning is exposure to the thinking process of others. And according to constructivists, they say that problem solvers talk themselves through the problem, right? So they're sitting there and looking at your math problem. I know I've do it in my head. Like when I was doing math problems, I might not voice it out loud. Sometimes I would, and I'd be like, okay, I have to do this first, and then this, and then this. And so I talk myself through it to figure out the problem. Well, according to constructivists, that's exactly how you're supposed to do it. That's how problem solvers do it, right? And so when you put children in cooperative groups, it allows them to hear that inner speech of others, of other learners, of other problem solvers, and they can learn how to successfully solve problems by hearing that inner speech, by learning from others. Okay, so the second Vygotsky theory that's in constructivism is the ZPD, the zone of proximal development. And we talked about this a lot at the beginning, and it's the range of tasks that a child might not be able to do alone, but they can do with the assistance of an adult or a more competent peer. Okay, and so here we have our pretty little picture. We have what is out of reach, what they can do, and then we have the ZPD, where learning occurs, right? And I like to think of it as that this right here, this is where teacher lives, this is where students live, and this is where we all live together. So, you know, this is teacher's house, that's student's house, this is school, right? This is where school happens in the ZPD. And on this picture, we have that learning occurs through scaffolding, which we will go into much greater detail farther on in the presentation. Okay. Cognitive apprenticeship. It's not the celebrity apprentice, but it is an apprenticeship, okay? It is a learning. It's all these like little attributes here. We have it's exploration, reflection, articulation, coaching, scaffolding, modeling, right? Cognitive apprenticeship, it's the process by which a learner gradually acquires expertise through the interaction with an expert. And that expert can be an adult or a peer that's older maybe, a peer that might be a little bit more advanced. That is the cognitive apprenticeship relationship. So with this in mind, we're talking about students are the apprentices of teachers. They are the teacher's little helpers, almost, or not little helpers, but like the apprentice to a blacksmith. It's a closer relationship, I guess you could say. It's more organic. It's not, the blacksmith isn't telling the other the apprentice that, well, you have to do it this way, you have to do it this, you have to do it my way, right? He's not telling him that, but the apprentice kind of is standing there and he's watching the blacksmith and how the blacksmith works. He sees how the blacksmith, makes the prod hot, and how he hammers the metal. And he can either take that and do it that way, or he can maybe see how he's doing it and then in his mind interpret it in how it would best suit him. Okay, and that's how the teacher-student apprenticeship should work. So back, you know how that thing said modeling in here, right? So the teachers are modeling to their students how learning should occur. And the teachers can accomplish this relationship through engaging students in complex tasks and then helping them through it, right? So back to the ZPD, we give them a complex problem and then we're going to help them solve it, okay? And then cooperative learning groups. This is a big deal. Cooperative learning groups, constructivists love it. It's what Chloe's presentation is all about, is just cooperative learning groups. But for this section, the only thing they stress about them is that they should be heterogeneous, and in that they should incorporate both low achieving and high achieving students, so that the more advanced students can help the less advanced students. Mediated learning, it's learning through scaffolding. Scaffolding is just another word for mediated learning. Students should be given, like I said, complex, difficult, realistic tasks, and then given enough help to achieve them. Okay, and these types of tasks can be, projects, simulations, explorations, other authentic tasks. And authentic tasks is really important to constructivists. They really, really, really stress the importance of things being relatable to real life experiences. They believe pretty much that learning isn't as nurturing, isn't as real, it isn't as grounded, I guess, or organic as it is whenever it has some sort of real life basis. It talks about situated learning, which, like I said, is learning that takes place in real life authentic tasks. Okay. It also emphasizes learning